In a hyper-competitive city like Hong Kong, I mean, parents basically spend their entire lives constructing these impenetrable safety nets for their kids.
Oh, absolutely. The calculus is, it's practically written into the DNA of the city.
Right. We build up this robust financial portfolio. We secure access to the top-tier international schools. We curate the right
And
connections.
we pass down property.
Yeah.
But, and this is a big but, the historical data, and specifically the ancient biblical texts, they reveal this really terrifying pattern about human nature and succession.
Yeah, because handing down profound power or wealth or institutional status without rigorously passing down the core, animating values that built them in the first place.
It's not a safety net at all.
No, it's a guaranteed recipe for total collapse.
It is the absolute fastest way to destroy both the heir and the institution.
Which is exactly what makes the recent Sunday sermon from Hong Kong Cheil Church so piercing.
It really was.
Yeah, and we are stepping into a deep reflection on that exact message today. So whether you were right there in the pews absorbing this in person, or, maybe you missed the message entirely this week, the community of the Word is confronting a profound question about legacy right now.
Right, like what are we actually transferring to the next generation?
Yeah.
Because the biblical narrative makes it abundantly clear that biological lineage guarantees absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all when it comes to character or spiritual survival, which forces us to look at the historical precedents the sermon laid out.
Yeah, there's this striking contrast between two models of inheritance. One triggers a catastrophic national crisis, and the other secures the future of a whole community.
So rather than just talking about succession in the abstract, let's look at the failure of an ancient institution, like the high priest Eli.
Right, operating at the very end of the judges' period in Israel. And to understand the magnitude of Eli's failure, we really have to understand the sociological fragility of Israel at this specific moment.
Because it's a highly unstable, decentralized era, right?
Exactly. I mean, Israel doesn't have a king yet. They don't have a standing army or a centralized government.
Yeah.
They're basically just this loose confederation of tribes.
And the only unifying thread holding their entire society together is their shared faith.
Yep, centralized at the sanctuary of Shiloh. And Eli is the high priest and the judge. He is essentially the Supreme Court justice, the chief religious official, and the de facto political leader, all rolled into one guy.
Wow. So whoever inherits Eli's position basically inherits the keys to the entire nation.
Precisely. And, well, Eli has two biological sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Eli just operates under this assumption of dynastic succession.
Like he just positions his sons to take over the family business?
Yeah, he trains them in the mechanics of the priesthood, how to execute the rituals, how to manage the sanctuary. But he fails to pass down the one thing that makes the priesthood functional.
The fear and reverence of God.
Right. They inherit the supreme entitlement of his power, but they possess zero internal moral compass.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on the mechanics of that for a second. Because if Eli is the high priest, shouldn't his sons have naturally absorbed that reverence just by, I don't know, proximity?
You would think so, right?
I mean, they grew up in the sanctuary, they watched the sacrifices every single day. How do you grow up at the absolute epicenter of a faith and completely miss the point of it?
Well, because proximity to holy things does not equal piety. In fact, if you are exposed to the mechanics of an institution without being taught the profound meaning behind it, that proximity actually breeds contempt.
Oh, wow. That makes sense.
Yeah, Hophni and Phinehas treated the sanctuary like a mafia shakedown operation.
Seriously.
The text in 1 Samuel is brutal. They weren't just incompetent, they were actively weaponizing their inherited power. When citizens brought meat for the sacred offerings, these sons would send servants with three-pronged forks.
Just to stab the meat and take whatever they wanted by force,
Yeah.
right? They were literally extorting the worshipers.
And exploiting them in far worse ways, too. They were committing wicked acts with the women who served at the sanctuary entrance.
Which is just awful. They took a space designed for human flourishing and worship and turned it into an arena for their own predatory appetites.
Exactly.
But, where is Eli in all of this? He's the most powerful man in the nation. He clearly has the authority to stop them.
Oh, he knows what is happening.
Yeah.
And his response is a masterclass in the failure of institutional succession.
Yeah, in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 23 and 24, Eli finally confronts them. He says, "Why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these wicked deeds of yours. No, my sons, it is not a good report that I hear spreading among the Lord's people."
Notice what he emphasizes there. I hear from all the people. It is not a good report.
He sounds like a CEO doing damage control for a PR crisis.
Right. He's worried about the optics, the reputation of the family name, the complaints from the public. He isn't actually addressing the rotting spiritual core of his sons.
He gives them a stern talking to, but he doesn't strip them of their authority. He just leaves the power right there in their hands.
And that lack of moral courage seals the fate of the nation. Because when you hand the keys of an institution to heirs who despise the mission, the collapse is total.
The sons completely ignore Eli.
Yep. And eventually they face a massive military threat from the Philistines. Because they treat God like a transactional commodity, they march the sacred Ark of the Covenant out onto the battlefield.
Like a magical good luck charm.
Exactly. Assuming their inherited status will just protect them automatically. They're both slaughtered on the same day, the Ark is captured, and Israel is plunged into despair. Eli's biological lineage ends in absolute disaster.
But that raises a massive tension in the narrative. I mean, if the biological succession fails and the designated heirs destroy the institution, how does the community survive?
Right, because the sermon didn't just leave us in the wreckage of Shiloh. Someone had to step into the void.
And the survival of the community didn't come through bloodline. It came through ideological and spiritual mentorship. Enter Samuel.
Yes, Samuel. He's such a fascinating counter-narrative because he doesn't have that safety net of entitlement.
He isn't Eli's biological son. He is dropped off at the sanctuary by his mother, Hannah, after he is weaned, just to fulfill a vow she made. So Eli basically raises him as an adopted apprentice.
And the mechanism of what Samuel inherits is entirely different. He doesn't grow up assuming he owns the sanctuary.
Right. He observes Eli, but instead of inheriting the political arrogance of Hophni and Phinehas, Samuel inherits Eli's duties.
He learns the posture of a servant. When the crisis of leadership hits, Samuel doesn't save the nation by inventing some brand new innovative theology.
Or orchestrating a massive paradigm shift.
No, he saves Israel by simply doing the job, honoring God, and calling the people to sincere repentance.
He inherits the underlying value system that the biological sons discarded. It's such a sharp warning about institutional decay.
It really is. You can pass down the building, the title, the budget, but if you don't pass down the character required to steward those things, the building will just crumble.
Which forces us to look at how we actually guarantee the transfer of character. If biological succession is this dangerous, how do we systematically pass down a resilient faith?
And this brings us to the New Testament model the sermon highlighted. We pivot from the catastrophic failure of Eli to the masterful mentorship between the Apostle Paul and his spiritual son, Timothy.
This is where we see the relay race functioning exactly as it should. Paul writes to Timothy in 2 Timothy, addressing him as his dear son.
Even though Paul has no biological children of his own, his legacy is entirely mentorship-based.
But the sermon pointed out something crucial here. Paul didn't start the fire in Timothy. He fanned a flame that was already burning.
Let me read the exact text because the lineage here is just stunning. It's 2 Timothy 1.5. Paul writes, "I have been reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also."
A matriarchal legacy. The baton passes from the grandmother to the mother to the son.
Yeah.
But what really strikes me is the specific descriptor Paul uses. He doesn't praise Timothy for having a highly intellectual faith or a wildly charismatic, miracle-working faith. He calls it a sincere faith.
Right. The Greek word Paul uses there is anipokritos. It literally means unfeigned or without hypocrisy. It's actually a theatrical term. It means to live without wearing a mask.
Oh, wow.
And we have to consider the environment Lois and Eunice were operating in. They lived in Lystra, which was a Greco-Roman colony. They were raising a child in a heavily pluralistic pagan environment.
Which honestly sounds incredibly familiar to anyone trying to raise a family or build a community in a modern secular metropolis today.
The parallels are exact. So how did they successfully pass down this belief system in such a hostile environment? By refusing to wear masks at home.
Because kids are incredibly intuitive, right? They can spot a hypocrite a mile away.
Exactly. If Lois and Eunice acted devout in the public assembly, but were ruthless, cynical, and self-serving at the dinner table, Timothy would have inherited their cynicism, not their faith.
A sincere faith means the private reality actually matches the public devotion. It is the everyday, unglamorous, consistent trust in God that becomes the psychological bedrock of a child's worldview.
Yes, exactly.
But wait, isn't the overarching Christian narrative heavily reliant on the dramatic lightning bolt moments of spiritual awakening? I mean, look at Paul himself.
Right, the road to Damascus.
He literally had a blinding vision of Jesus on the road to Damascus that knocked him to the ground and reversed his entire life trajectory in an instant. It seems like everyday consistency kind of pales in comparison to that kind of dramatic intervention.
Well, we obsess over those Damascus Road experiences because they make for incredible stories. But the sermon offered a vital reality check on this.
What was that?
Those lightning bolt moments might happen once in a lifetime, if at all. The ability to endure decades of hardship, to navigate complex moral gray areas, and to sustain a community that is fueled entirely by the quiet, accumulated firewood of everyday faith.
So even Paul's radical conversion relied on that firewood.
Oh, absolutely.
How so? His conversion was a total rupture from his previous trajectory of persecuting the early church.
It was a rupture in trajectory, sure, but not a rupture in foundational knowledge. Just 2 verses earlier, in 2 Timothy 1:3, Paul writes, "I thank God whom I serve as my ancestors did, with a clear conscience."
Oh, interesting.
Paul had the theological scaffolding to understand his vision of Jesus precisely because generations of his ancestors had diligently passed down the Jewish scriptures, the concept of a Messiah, and the reverence for God.
So the Damascus Road ignited the fire, but generations of ancestors had been relentlessly stacking the firewood in Paul's mind.
Exactly. Without that inherited foundation, the lightning bolt would have just been blinding light.
Stacking the firewood. Lois and Eunice were stacking the firewood for Timothy every single day through their sincere, unmasked actions.
Yep.
Which brings the entire weight of this historical analysis crashing directly into the present reality of the community of the Word, specifically within the context of Hong Kong Cheil Church.
Right. How does this ancient relay race translate to the mechanics of a modern church community?
Well, the sermon delivered a very sharp critique of modern succession. There is a deep gravitational pull in contemporary institutions to fixate on the external shell.
We obsess over passing down the physical building or optimizing the church budget, preserving the denominational structure, maintaining institutional control.
But the warning of Eli's sons is absolute. Passing down the physical shell without the spiritual engine inside of it is a death sentence. It leads to factionalism, corruption, and an utter loss of purpose.
And in a city uniquely defined by transience, relying on the physical shell is a terrible strategy anyway.
Hong Kong is a revolving door. Expatriates arrive for contracts and leave. Families emigrate. Students graduate and move abroad.
The membership role of any community in this city is in a state of constant flux.
So if the true inheritance of Hong Kong Cheil Church isn't the real estate on the island, what is it?
The true inheritance is the living repository of accumulated stories. It is the collective memory of how God has intervened, sustained, and guided this specific congregation through historical crises and seasons of immense joy.
So even as members of the community of the Word scatter across the globe, they don't take the building with them. They take the spiritual DNA of the community.
And the sermon distilled that specific spiritual DNA into 3 foundational pillars. The legacy Hong Kong Cheil Church is attempting to pass down is summarized as God first, word first, prayer first.
God first, word first, prayer first. It sounds deceptively simple, almost like a Sunday school rhyme.
It does, but if we analyze what it actually cost to implement that in this specific geographical location, it is a profound act of resistance.
It is absolute rebellion. Walk through the Central Financial District. The relentless, deafening message of the culture is capital first, status first, self-preservation first.
The entire ecosystem is designed to reward ruthlessness and penalize vulnerability.
So to tell the next generation that prioritizing God over worldly leverage, prioritizing the ancient text of the Word over the shifting, optimized opinions of modern culture, and prioritizing prayer over relying exclusively on your own human capital.
That creates immense friction, which is exactly why it must be passed down through sincere faith.
Right.
You cannot teach God first theoretically in a city like this. The next generation has to see you actually risk a financial loss to maintain your integrity.
They have to see you open the Word when you are absolutely exhausted.
They have to hear you pray when all human logic dictates you should panic. that unmasked sincerity is the only way the baton successfully leaves your hand and enters theirs.
Because faith is a relay race. We are not expected to invent a new religion or run the entire marathon in isolation.
No, not at all.
Our singular responsibility is to reach backward, gratefully receive the baton of sincere faith from the predecessors who worshiped before us, and then run our leg of the race.
We add our own specific brick to the structure. Our personal testimony of how God proved faithful in the crucible of our own lives, our own careers, our own families.
And then we intentionally, carefully hand it to the next generation. We look them in the eye and say, this is the historical record of God's faithfulness to us. This is how the Word illuminated our darkest seasons. This is how prayer kept us from crumbling under the pressure.
And that inherited resilience will prove infinitely more valuable to them than any offshore account or property deed. Wealth can be evaporated by a market crash overnight.
But a sincere faith, tested by fire and passed from hand to hand, can weather any societal collapse.
Absolutely.
As we draw this deep reflection to a close, we are going to shift the posture of this time. We're moving from analytical discussion into a space of deliberate personal reflection. The goal is not just to dissect the sermon of Hong Kong Cheil Church, but to let its gravity settle into our actual lives.
I invite the community of the Word to slow down. Step out of the relentless slipstream of the city. Forget the emails, the deadlines, the anxieties of tomorrow for just a moment. Envision that relay baton currently resting in your hands. We discussed how faith manifests in different characteristics. Examine the specific texture of your own faith right now. Is it a faith characterized by quiet, stubborn endurance? Is it a faith of radical hospitality and service? Is it a faith defined by a deep, logical defense of the truth? Hold that reality in your mind. And as you consider the ultimate legacy you are building, ask yourself this. If your children, or if the rising generation of Hong Kong Cheil Church, were asked to accurately describe the faith they inherited directly from watching your life, what would they say it looks like?